Welcome to the Women in Motorsport. Joe Samaniego, along with Ben Schneider and Daniel Zeri from Racers, the girls behind the helmet. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show, Mark and Robin, and our newest one, David, for investing in the Grid Network. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Click the link in the video description to invest in us each month, or a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee, as some of these fine folks have done so in the past week. Now, big news that came out this week. We haven't heard of any new F1 Academy drivers, but we did hear of the 2023 calendar coming out. F1 Academy, 7 rounds. The 7 rounds are the Austria Red Bull Ring, Valencia, Spain, Barcelona, Zandvoort in Netherlands, Monza, the Temple of Speed, La Cassette, France, and Circus of America will close out the season. Overall, Daniel, starting with you, what's your reaction to the calendar announced, and including the non F1 events like Valencia and over in France?
Yeah, absolutely. The calendar was really something that we've been waiting for a long time. Also, the drivers were really looking forward to learn the calendars. As Bruno Michel, the series CEO, has said, that they really wanted to have as many F1 tracks on the calendar as possible. They did manage to get quite a lot of good tracks on board, I believe, for the first year. Red Bull Ring, of course, the opening round is an F1 track. We're hosting the Austrian Grand Prix. Then we go to Valencia just 1 week later. Interestingly, that it will be in support of a Euro NASCAR Championship that round. Then they will be in Spain again, in Barcelona, as you mentioned, together with FRECA, with Formula Regional European Championship. That also is interesting, because obviously that is kind of the next step after Formula 4. It will be like Formula Regional, so it makes kind of sense that also they will be around the same teams that will probably make the step up to Formula Regional. And then there's also Zandvoort together with DTM, so another really important sports car championship in support of F1 Academy. And then Monza together with WEC, World Endurance Championship. So I think it's really interesting that they are also supporting some big series with not only single seaters but also sports car racing like WEC and DTM. So that's kind of interesting. At Paul Ricard, I believe that so far, I checked, that is a standalone event. There is nothing scheduled yet for the same weekend at Le Castellet, but also that is a track that, while it's no more part of the F1 calendar since this year, it's really a track that it hosts a lot of other races, like in GT racing and in prototypes. So it kind of makes sense, because we also have to understand that probably not all of these young drivers will end up in Formula One. So it's important that they're learning these tracks, but whatever they will come next in their careers. And then the final round at COTA, which is the only one together with Formula One. I think it makes a lot of sense that they are not with Formula One on a steady basis like it was W Series, because it gives them a lot more freedom during the weekends. And we've seen this because they also announced the weekend format. They will have two 40 minutes practice session, which is kind of a lot, which is really good for track time. And this is something that, together with Formula One, you're not allowed to do, because the schedules are really, really tight with Formula One. Of course, you always have the main event taking priority if there are red flags or anything like that. And with young drivers, it can happen. We see this a lot in junior single seaters, like in Formula 4 and Formula Regional. So it makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, that they are not in the same weekend with Formula One. Then they have two qualifying sessions, Q1 and Q2, that will set the grid respectively for race 1 and race 3, 15-minute session, and then the top 8 from the first qualifying will be reversed into the shorter 20-minute race 2, which will award less points than the first and the third. I think it's a really interesting new format. We will be really looking forward to see what's happening in this new championship.
Yeah, Daniel, I don't know if you want to just check your mic settings real quick, because I started getting some a little bit of static feedback on my end about halfway through your answer there. But in terms of the scheduling, and reaction to the calendar from my part, I couldn't help but notice. I know, Joe, we were talking about this backstage before the show began. It looks like every round's going to be in Europe except the season finale in Coda. So I think this is probably, a similar approach to what I think the W Series, a lot of people were saying should have done, aligning themselves with the big series and making sure that you try to centralize the calendar in Europe. Obviously, being owned by Formula One, the F1 Academy, I think, doesn't, I don't know if cash is as much of a concern. I'll certainly defer to Daniel on that one, since he's much more in that world than I am. But I think this is a very good calendar for an opening season, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we have, and nice for us here in America to have the season finale here at Circuit of the Americas in Austin.
It's very exciting to see the season finale here in the United States. I think it's going to be really huge, and especially the popularity of Formula One in the United States as it is growing and growing. United States is going to see 3 F1 rounds. This is just going to make COTA, I think, even stand out more. Miami, we know there's a lot of folks excited for that one. Las Vegas seems to be a race everyone around the world is really excited about. Don't want to leave COTA out of it. So having them have the final race weekend for F1 Academy, I think it's just a brilliant move. And of course, you're going to have a sprint race there. So that's going to be a very busy weekend with the sprint races as well as F1 Academy. As you guys have already mentioned, 7 races, but of course, 21 races, 7 weekends, 21 races. As Daniel mentioned, the format, you got 2 practices, 2 qualifyings. Qualifying 1, we determined the starting lineup for race 1 and 3. Race 1 and 2. Race 3 will be start by qualifying 2. And then the top 8 finishers will be inverted from race 1 to race 2. So if you got first, you'll be 8th, second down to 7th, all the way to 8th being first. The catch is with that second race, that inverted top 8, 10 points only for the winner, then it goes down to 8, 6. So you don't get the full 25 points like the third race and the first race. Ben, what do you think of this 3-race format, including the inverted order for that second race?
I don't know, Joe. I think sometimes there's a philosophy that less can be more. I think that might be the case here. I don't know that, launching a brand new series with 3 races per round or weekend or whatever, I understand that sometimes that's how, single-seater series have done things. I know Formula 2 went to 3 races per weekend a couple of years ago, but that was coming out of the COVID pandemic. And obviously, some places were still in stricter lockdowns with restrictions than others. So they wanted to make sure they had enough races that they could get in here. But, I don't know that, 3 races per round here. It seems to me, maybe the resources would be better used if we did, 2 rounds or 2 races per round, and maybe we're able to add a couple of new tracks to the schedule. I don't know if that would be, in 2024 or beyond, but I don't know. You try to fit 3 races per weekend when you're already supporting, an F1 race and maybe an F2 race to go with that, depending on who else is there that weekend. It just seems like they're trying to do a little bit too much for me, especially for a series in its inaugural season.
Well, if talking about what you just said, Ben, I think you are, you are onto something mentioning what the Formula 2 did during the pandemic. But we also have to remember that every Formula 4 championships around the world actually do 3 races, because for these young drivers, most of them are drivers just out of karting. So really, track time is the single most important thing for them. So having 3 races is really important, because 21 races, it's a lot of track time. It's I saw that it's like more than 3 hours of track time per weekend, which is amazing for them, even compared to what W Series was able to do in the past. I do agree with you that it could be interesting to have maybe 2 races per rounds and a couple more rounds, but that also would mean a lot more money on the teams, because of course you have more traveling around. So for a first season, I think maximizing the budget. And I already know that some of the teams, they are trying to really to have a good season with that amount of budget, because there's some other championships like the Italian one and the Spanish ones are running on a lot more budgets than those ones. So having 7 rounds with 3 races, at that budget is a really great thing so far.
The budget, the seat time, that's going to be really exciting to see all this action from the F1 Academy drivers. Of course, scheduling, that's where I'm getting a little bit concerned. We saw how, as you mentioned, Daniel, earlier, a red flag could throw off this session essentially. Be really interesting. Each race will have a 1 point bonus for the fastest lap. Now, of course, one of the topic main people are curious about is the W Series and what will happen. Nothing announced yet. We've been seeing on social media their accounts have been getting a little bit more quieter. A lot of people are wondering why F1 FIA didn't just partner up or even buy the W Series when this was originally announced. We know the differences between the W Series and the F1 Academies. It started off with the independent teams when it was announced F1 Academy was going to come up. Now we are seeing the full scope of this different F1 Academy compared to W Series with the 7 rounds, 21 races, a lot more seat time. You can only imagine that would have been a much bigger burden for the W Series since they will have all the cars, the mechanics, the engineers. Daniel, starting with you, seeing the difference between the two now, does this justify the reason behind the move to create F1 Academy?
That's a big question. Really, I think the W Series are in a difficult position now because, of course, the F1 Academy is growing strongly because they are building on teams that are already doing this in Formula 2 and Formula 3, and most of them are also racing in other Formula 4 championships around the world. So they already started from a good basis and with a pretty straightforward traditional business model. So yes, they will have half of the budget covered by F1, but the other half of the budget still has to be covered by the drivers. So this is a very proven business model. While W Series really the big innovation was covering the expense, being a free to enter championship. So that really was the thing that tested the W Series business model, and ultimately it didn't work as far as we've seen. But I think they will have to try something different if they are going to come back. And so far, we really have seen no news from them, so that's quite worrying to some degree. But if they are going to be back, they would really, I believe, try something different, because so far we've seen also all the drivers that are aiming for a future in single seaters. Also, some of them that were racing in W Series already, stepping back to Formula 4 because they really wanted to continue on that path and with F1 Academy. So I think if W Series still will be if they will have their place still in motor racing, they will have to try something different, and probably this is completely my idea, nothing proven, there's no proof to this, but why not trying something with sports car? I mean, there are also drivers that are seeing a future in sports car racing, in prototypes, with WEC and IMSA really having a big boom in the next couple of years. Why not trying something completely different with targeting drivers that they want to have a future in sports car racing? This is, as I mentioned, nothing that I, no proof to this. I have no idea what they are working on so far. But I just to say that I think they will have to work on something really different, because F1 Academy, even though they didn't want to be competitors at the beginning, they ended up having all the drivers that want to pursue a career in single seaters.
Yeah, well, I still think, even if F1 Academy wants to do its own thing, maybe you could argue it would have been easier to at least buy the foundation and the assets that W Series had and then convert it to whatever the mission of F1 Academy was going to be. But, it does sound like they're going down their own path with a slightly different direction than W Series had. So I suppose that does justify the reason behind at least a rebranding of it. And again, I'm not as immersed into that side of things as Daniel is, so I'll certainly defer to him for the more detailed explanation behind that. But I don't know. There's still something about it that seems off to me. But to have W Series aligned with F1, in a lot of races in their calendar, and now to see them in financial trouble, and still questions now on February 24th as to whether or not they're going to be back for 2023. I don't know. But part of me wishes that maybe these two series could coexist, but I think it might have been easier if they could have found a way to combine their assets and work together. I think that might have been able to benefit everybody, but I guess we'll never know on that front.
One of the things we'll never know, as you mentioned, the two series almost reminds me a little bit about that split open wheel had. You got the fans base divided. I feel this is a much smaller fan base, but overall, it's just something where now, as we've been reporting the last couple of weeks with drivers that were in W Series making the switch over, does seem less and less likely we'll have the same W Series from the last couple of years with F1 on the race weekends. It's going to be really interesting. Of course, any news that develops with the W Series, we will report on right here on the Grid Network. Now, of course, one of the big stories as well, too, besides F1 Academy, some of the race recaps. Ben, we had the ARCA season opening race at Daytona, the Brand 200 for the ARCA Menard Series. Full field of cars. We had a lot of cars trying to get in the field. And then, of course, we had in total 5 female drivers. 3 of them had raced in Daytona before. Of course, Tony, Amber, and Natalie Decker. However, it was Mandy Chick who didn't post a practice lap when we were on the air last week, and we were questioning, is that something usual? She comes home in 5th place, ahead of Amber in 6th place. Ben, how surprised were you to see Mandy come with a strong finish in a race where we didn't have a lot of cars drop out? We didn't have that massive car. We still had 28 cars on the lead lap at the end of the race.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, she made a liar out of me. I remember you were asking, how do you think Mandy Chick's going to be able to do? And I said, the goal for her first super speedway start, I think it's only her 3rd ARCA race ever. Just try to keep the car clean, maybe come home with a top 20, maybe a top 15 if you can catch some good breaks here or there. She went out and got a top 5. I mean, absolutely unbelievable, fantastic run for her and her team. And like you said, Joe, I mean, it was a massive field. It's the largest field we've seen in any ARCA race in years. I know we usually get a higher car count at Daytona because it's the season opener and the biggest race of the year for these teams. But 41 cars ended up on the entry list. There was that weird situation with Andres Perez de Lara taking the practice lap. Of course, he's not 18 yet, so he has to sit this round out. And then one other car withdrew, so we ended up having 39 starters, which is essentially a full field. And we saw great racing all throughout the field all day. There were a lot of close calls, and there certainly were opportunities to wad them all up and have a big one happen a couple of times. But, the drivers for the most part did a good job keeping the cars clean, and it was a great sprint finish to the end. Mandy Chick ended up in the right place at the right time, came home with a very strong 5th place finish that I know is going to be a huge confidence boost for everybody on that team as we head not just to Talladega in a couple of months, but throughout the rest of the season as well. It's a fantastic run for Mandy Chick and the entire 74 car.
Yeah, the 74 car, seeing that cross the finish line, 5th place, very excited for her. And overall, I think this really, we've seen a couple of interviews Mandy had done, just over the moon excited, but she kept crediting her team. They worked hard at it, and I think it really shows that for a small team, especially in the super speedways, it is an equalizer where, as pretty much we've heard time and time again, if your car could start, you have a shot at winning it as long as you keep everything clean. One driver that had a little bit of issues, but still come home in 6th place, Amber Balkan, was running up front for most of the race, but of course she had that contact with Frankie Muniz, some damage to the car, but was still able to be up front contending almost all race long. Overall, did Amber look like she had been a contender for a top 10 or a win had it not been for the damage? And what is this leading up for Talladega? Is this going to set up for bigger expectations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, anytime you're driving a Venturini car on a super speedway, I mean, that alone comes with expectations of running up front and competing for the win. I know some people were a little bit critical of Amber with how many close calls she found herself in there during the race. I mean, obviously this is the ARCA Menard series. I don't think it's fair to hold these drivers to the standard that we hold Cup drivers to. For a lot of drivers, it's their first, second, or only third time on a track like this. So, it's still a learning experience for her, even though she has a little bit more experience than some of the other drivers in the field. And she did a solid job making the best of what she had, because she did pick up a little bit of damage during a couple of those close calls. And I know you mentioned there was a close call with Frankie Muniz as well, who had a great run, just missed out on top 10 himself. So huge day for him moving forward too. But yeah, Amber Balkan coming home just one spot short of a top 5, her best career finish in the ARCA Menard Series. I think this is going to set up to, set her up for a strong run at Talladega. And whatever other races that she can add to her calendar. I know she's still looking for sponsorship. She's been posting that on her socials all week. She's still looking for partners to bring on to her season this year so that she can add more races. And she's going to have a great car and a great opportunity to do it again when we get to Talladega here in just a couple of months. So I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do.
Talladega is going to be really interesting. Of course, that is the biggest super speedway here in the United States. As we mentioned, 28 cars finished on the lead lap. The next race for the ARCA Menard Series a couple of weeks' time at Phoenix. Some of the other drivers, Natalie Decker, 14th place in her super speedway return in quite some time. Logan Misaraka, 18th in her super speedway debut. And Tony Brenniger, 23rd. Not exactly the day she was hopeful for, especially with Venturini and seeing what Amber had done. Had to be a little bit of a disappointment to be 23rd. But overall, finish on the lead lap, completing all the laps. Which drivers, Ben, did you feel made the most of the race weekend out of all of them?
Yeah, it was an unfortunate deal for Tony Breidinger there. Again, she was also involved in a couple of close calls. There was that one instance where, I forget if they were going into turn 1 or going into turn 3, but she ended up on the apron on the flat and had to get the car, woe down a little bit and ended up sliding back up onto the banking. So that kind of shuffled her back and, really was never able to recover there. So 23rd, definitely not the day that she would have hoped for. I know she's going to be back later this season as well on a partial schedule with Venturini, so she's going to have some opportunities to make up for that. Logan Misaraka, I was very impressed with in qualifying, but she was kind of involved in that first opening incident on the second lap. Her car started slowing. I don't know if she had a tire issue or something like that, but she was able to recover, get back up, run up front for a little bit, come home, with a solid finish in the middle of the pack. And I know it's technically her super speedway debut. I know the people on the Fox broadcast were saying this as well. She's got more miles at Daytona than really most of the rest of the field combined, with how much driving she's done with the NASCAR racing experience. So feels kind of weird to call her a super speedway rookie, but I guess in the ARCA Menard Series she is. So a solid debut for her. And of course, Natalie Decker not driving the equipment that she had when she got her 5th and 6th place finishes at this track a couple of years ago in the ARCA Menard Series. So for her to come back with a 14th place finish and keep the car clean, bring it home in one piece, I think is a very solid day for her as well. But the driver that made the most out of the race weekend, it has to be Mandy Chick. That is not a car that is on the same level budget-wise as your Venturinis or your Joe Gibbs number 18 cars or your Rev Racings or a team like that. For a team like Mandy Chick's to come together and bring home a top 5 finish at Daytona is just an incredible story, and one that I think is going to set them on a good path for the rest of the 2023 season.
Going to be a very exciting 2023 season in the ARCA Menard Series. And of course, we'll be following the ARCA Menard Series all year long right here. We bring Daniel back. Daniel, along with Daytona, we had Formula 4 UAE, especially we had 3 female racers there. Quite a lot of racing going on. And of course, we know one, Lena Buller, is going to F1 Academy next year.
Oh yes, also Bianca Bustamante was there, also confirmed for the F1 Academy Championship. But as you mentioned, quite a lot of racing in the UAE, both the Formula Regional Middle East and Formula 4 UAE. Formula 4 was particularly interesting because there were 5 female drivers at the start of the season. Then Emily De Heus has not been competing in the last 2 rounds because MP Motorsport already announced at the start of the year that they had too many drivers and for as many cars, so they had to swap around some drivers. But Hamda Al-Kubaisi had one of the strongest results during the whole season. She was 7th in race 3. Unfortunately, she also had an accident on the final lap, which brought out the red flag, and then the race was ended with her accident, and she unfortunately broke her wrist. She had surgery a couple of days later. Now she's recovering. She's back at home and recovering. But also quite interesting that she still got points for that accident in that race, because of course the red flag brought the results back to 1 lap prior to the accident. So she still classified in P7, which was best finish of the year in the Formula 4 UAE. Also, Bianca Bustamante had a more troubled weekend compared to some of the races that she had done in the previous rounds. She had a practice accident, so that was kind of starting on the back foot. Then also the car was not quite perfect yet for qualifying. When you have 40 cars in the span of 1 second in qualifying and not a perfect car, you end up at the back of the grid, and it's terribly difficult to recover after that. So quite a tough weekend for Bianca Bustamante at the Yas Marina circuit on the final round of the Formula 4 UAE. But was quite a decent round for Lena Bula as well, because she had, we always remember that Lena was racing in Formula 3, Formula Regional European Championship in the last couple of years, but she had to stop her campaign last year in mid-season really, after the Monaco round, because of she ran out of budget. So she had like 8 months with no racing. So when she came back in Formula 4 UAE, obviously, as she tried to prepare as much as she could for Formula 1 Academy, she really had to learn the car again and get back into the rhythm of Formula 4, which I believe she did well. She had a couple of unfortunate rounds, but in the clean races she was up there around the top 15, which is pretty good for 40 car field. Extremely competitive, because I think that was one of the most competitive junior single seaters championships field in quite a long time. And in the last round at Abu Dhabi, a track that she knew already because she had competed in a Formula Regional Middle East last year in just a couple of appearances. She had raced at Yas Marina already, and she finished again in the P15. So another solid weekend for Lena Bula, which of course will now try to get ready for her Formula 1 Academy debut, as well as Bianca Bustamante. Well, for Victoria Blochina, she's likely. There's not an official announcement yet, but she's likely coming back to Formula 4, to the Italian Formula 4. She did already this championship last year. She had quite I would say, not a challenging season in Formula 4 UAE, because she was always already the top 20. She, again, in Abu Dhabi, she was P22, P21. So always around those positions, which for a driver that has already 1 year in Formula 4 experience is kind of okay. I think I expected her to be a little further up the grid. But also last year she was not that great in the UAE, and then went to Italy in a championship that was arguably more competitive, and she did better. So I think we can expect Victoria to, if she indeed comes back to Italian Formula 4, to do better than last year in the series.
Big weekend for everyone there, and of course will be really interesting if Victoria goes to Formula 4. If Italian Series, one of the bigger ones out there, huge fields too, which is going to be really interesting once we see those huge fields. It still just amazes me when you have over 30 cars out there, just nuts. Now, Ben, going to a series that is known for having over 30 trucks instead of cars, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, they are back. Craftsman sponsoring again. Of course, they're the original sponsors of the Truck Series when it was launched back in the late 90s. Now they are back again, and we saw a pretty exciting Daytona race. It was rain shortened though. Haley Deegan, her race unfortunately was shortened way too early. She started the race in 12th. Stage 1 went well for her, but on lap 28, big crash took her out. Essentially, Haley had nowhere to go, entering the trioval as 3 wide ahead of her. Got into some contact, started to crash. She did score 7 points in stage 1 with her first place finish, one of only 2 Fords to finish in the top 10 at the end of stage 1. And it was a short race, as I mentioned, but she completed the first stage, got stage points. Do you believe Haley had potentials for a top 10 finish that night, considering it was only a short amount of laps she did, but what she had shown so far that night?
Well, to be honest, Joe, I think she had the potential to win the race. I mean, certainly a top 10 and a top 5 even, perhaps even a win. She had a very strong truck, and that was evident in stage 1. That was evident all throughout the Thor Sport Racing camp. It's just kind of unfortunate how it played out. She got shuffled back after the stage ended, due to the pit cycle and everything, and, just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But had the race gone the full distance and had she not gotten caught up in that, I think she certainly had the potential for a strong run. I mean, the stage, being a mini race to the finish and race to the start finish line to the end of the stage, she came home 4th there, so what does that tell you about what she could have done had she not gotten caught up in that? So, obviously the trucks don't go back to a super speedway until Talladega much later in the year when we get well into the playoff season. But, I think this is, Haley has to hold her head high. She had a strong truck. I think, like we've been saying, Joe, you've got to wait until we get into the heart of the season a little bit to really, judge where she's at in terms of performance and, where this partnership's going to take her. But, she definitely has the equipment necessary to get the job done. And we'll see as we go to some different types of tracks here in the coming months, whether or not she's able to take that step forward that we've been hoping to see these last couple of years in the truck series.
And you mentioned the heart of the season, of course, one of the big ones is the 1.5 ovals. There are going to be 6 1.5 oval races during the regular season. Haley's 25th in the standings. This is much shorter compared to the Cup Series. 15 races in the regular season. The next one, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, the 1.5 oval over there. What kind of indicator will this be when Haley gets out there? Because again, they're going to have a practice, qualifying, and then the race. Do you anticipate that this will be a real true indicator, or is it still too early until we get a little bit further into the season?
It'll definitely be the first real test. Daytona is always a bit of an outlier because of, how unpredictable it can be. You can, find yourself in the right place at the right time of a draft and, take your underfunded car or truck to a better finish than it's probably capable of on most weekends. You could also have a very strong car or truck and get caught up in somebody else's mess and end up in the 30s with a DNF. So, I think I don't know if this is an indicator that's going to be representative of the entire season, but it's certainly the first true real test in the heart of a season for her as to what we'll be seeing throughout the rest of 2023. And, it drives me crazy how the truck series is scheduled and how it plays out, because, I was just taking a look at the schedule again. It's going to be the very end of July, at Richmond, and that's going to be the playoff cutoff race on July 29th. Whereas, the other series, we don't start the playoffs until, a little bit later. We were talking about this on the Encore show last year. The start of the playoff seasons don't really line up across the top 3 series. So, it kind of frustrates me that the truck series is a little bit more, front heavy, if you will, in terms of how the schedule plays out. But at the same time, I think that's, maybe good for the drivers because it gives them more opportunities early on in the calendar year to really know what they have underneath them with their teams and their equipment. So yeah, I think this is the first true test for her, whether or not it's an indicator. She's going to have multiple opportunities to either make up for it if Vegas doesn't go so well, or to build on it if it does. So we'll see what happens. And Joe, I think you might be muted there.
Really interesting to see what happens. As you say, overall, it's going to be, I think, a pretty exciting season. I have to agree. It seems like the truck series, their playoffs start so early. July goes all the way to the end of the season like everybody else. Be nice to see some sort of change there, but that'll be another time. Of course, Daniel, you're back. Formula Winter Series, we saw them racing this past weekend, and one driver, Neri Marti, who is, of course, going to F1 Academy next year. People are watching her, seeing how she will do overall. How was her weekend? And there was another driver as well, too.
As we mentioned previously with Formula 4 UAE, also in Europe, in Spain, there was this new championship, the Formula Winter Series, which is also using the new generation Formula 4 cars, which is designed for drivers and teams to prepare for their summer season. Among them, there was Nerea Marti on her home track at Valencia. She literally lives around there, and she did very well. She was the grid also expanded. There were a lot more drivers and a lot more teams in the second round in Valencia compared to 1 week before at Jerez. So it was quite a good result for Nerea. She was always around the top 5, fourth, and in one practice session she was also third. But unfortunately, during the races, she really struggled to keep the car within the track limits. So she ended up with a 5-second penalty in race 1 and with a 10-second penalty in race 2, which really, the results are really not representative of what her pace and potential could have been. She ended up in P7 and P10 in the 2 races. Still decent, but of course she had a lot more pace. She could have been in the top 5. But as you mentioned, there was also a new driver. She was racing in the US last year. She's Uruguayan. She's Maite Cáceres. She raced in the Formula 4 US last year. And it was her first race in Europe. She moved to Barcelona for studying. She's now studying in Barcelona University, and so she is exploring opportunities also here in Europe. And she had a very late call in the week, like on Thursday before the race, to join the Formula Winter Series for a one-off. She did take the opportunity, even though of course it was quite a late one. And did very well because she had a 2 top 10s also. Very first time on that track, very first time in that car, and she ended up in P9 and P10. So a very strong debut in Europe for Maite Cáceres. Also, it was her first top 10 because in the US last year, she didn't have a full season last year. She missed a couple of rounds, but her best result was a P12 at Road America, I believe. So good result for Maite here in Europe, and we will see in the coming weeks if she has anything lined up for her future over here as well.
Very exciting debut for her, and of course, Nerea Marti. Everyone's gonna be watching her, especially leading up to F1 Academy. Now, this leads up to our one shining moment, where we discuss about one shining moment from this past race weekend. Ben, when it comes to the one shining moment for this past race weekend, what is your one shining moment?
I think I hinted at it a couple of times already, but how can it not be Mandy Chick? I mean, to be the front runner of the 5 women who were in the ARCA race this past weekend, and to do it with a small family-run team and only her 3rd career start in the ARCA Menard Series, to come away with a top 5 finish is simply incredible. And I don't want to sound too redundant here because I talked about why that's so incredible, earlier on in the show. But just to drive the point home here in the one shining moment, it was a fantastic run and really sets her up well for the rest of the 2023 season. But that undoubtedly, far and away, is my one shining moment for women in motorsports this weekend.
Easily, I would have to say I agree. Mandy Chick has to be my one shining moment. Just to be a little bit more different, I will bring up that Amber Balkan had a great run going. Overall, mistakes here and there, but she was talking about post-race, looking for those sponsorship opportunities to get more seat time, especially with Venturini Racing, could have a lot of potential there. But yeah, I would have to say probably Mandy's as well, my shining moment. Daniel, when it comes to you, what was your one shining moment from this past week?
Well, hardly. I would not disagree with you guys in both the shout out to Mandy and Amber, but I will probably just mention Gabriela Gilkova, who was at only her 2nd race in Aston Martin GT4 car and won the race in GT Winter Series at Valencia. So big shout out also to Gabriela, even though we didn't fully report on that race.
And of course, one of the big things as well when it comes to reports from the track, we encourage everyone to visit the website racersbehindthehelmet.com. Get a full update, and you can view the calendar of all the upcoming races, including this upcoming race this weekend, Trans Am, Formula Pro USA, and FIA Formula 3 coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, all the articles from the team over at Racers Behind the Helmet, including more in depth about the F1 Academy calendar being revealed, the Formula Winter Series, and much, much more at racersbehindthehelmet.com. And once again, we thank everyone for tuning in to today's program. Be sure to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, and David, our newest one. Invest through Patreon each and every month. You can also do a one-time contribution on Buy Me a Coffee or Buy Coffee for your favorite on-air personality here. And of course, visit the Grid Network on social media. You can find our website, gridranking.com. Follow us on Twitter at gridranking. And of course, hit the bell icon, like, and comment on the video. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm as we work towards our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the Indianapolis 500. For Ben Schneider and Daniel Zeri from Racers to Girls Behind the Helmet, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.